At the very beginning of the cabinet meeting devoted to the economy, President Karol Nawrocki outlined his expectations for cooperation with the government. In my opinion, the basic condition for the success of this cooperation is the implementation by all of us, by me as President and by the government, of a policy of keeping to our commitments. That is the direction that will result in fewer vetoes and fewer public discussions. As the President said, it is important for members of the government to present their current commitments to the public. Such a specific roadmap would ensure that the President is informed about what is currently happening with the programme you ran on in the parliamentary elections and your commitments to the Polish people, and it would also be valuable for you and for me as the President of Poland. For Karol Nawrocki, cooperation with the government is also important, which, since the election of the new president, does not seem to be helping him in this regard. Prime Minister, ladies and gentlemen, we must also eliminate the impression of chaos in the cooperation between the president and the Polish government. Prime Minister Donald Tusk began in his usual style, by lecturing. The Cabinet Council, and it has always been this way, is a place where the President can be informed about the government's activities, especially in areas where the President has, for example, limited ability to assess the situation, lack of knowledge, and malice towards the head of state. In general, I see only nice people in this room, so I am happy to return your kind opinion about those gathered here. But this is not about exchanging pleasantries. As we know, some people define the category of nice differently. He then went on to praise the December 13th coalition's actions at length. One could have the impression that Poland, ruled by Donald Tusk, is a land of milk and honey. We have record growth, record low inflation, record low unemployment, and we certainly have reason to be proud of this, and I hope that the President will also take note of these fairly obvious facts. But the situation in the country is different from that described by Donald Tusk, as the President pointed out. The Prime Minister also regularly used the adjective record-breaking, but according to my information, the deficit is at a record high in the history of Poland since 1989. We asked about the words spoken during Karol Nawrocki's first Cabinet Council in the Sejm.
Odbyła się Rada Gabinetowa, będziemy stać na straży, aby to nie był jakiś...
A cabinet meeting was held and we will ensure that it is not a substitute for the government, but in accordance with the constitution. It must be shown that the President does not seem to be very aware that our country has a parliamentary system, not a presidential one. Why is Prime Minister Tusk's tone so sharp? It was a very good tone from the Polish Prime Minister. The government governs, the President represents. The President is calling for what is the essence of democracy, namely credibility and keeping to commitments. We can see that Donald Tusk's government is completely reneging on all the promises it made to the Polish people. And that is why the President, as the head of the Polish state, representing the interests of all Poles, scored points and demanded that the government do what it had committed to do. The words of the Prime Minister, who tried to convince everyone that he was doing great, were, to put it mildly, untrue. Today it was clear at the cabinet meeting that he is continuing this tactic. That is, whatever goes wrong in Poland will be blamed on the budget, allegedly due, for example, to President Karol Nawrocki's veto. In reality, it is simply due to the laziness of this government, and today he has to win either by getting down to work or by finding a way to shift the blame onto someone else. Unfortunately, Donald Tusk has chosen the latter option. Prime Minister Tusk missed the boat long ago and lost touch with public opinion, because if he says at today's Cabinet Council that Poles are satisfied with the economic situation, then he has clearly lost touch with reality. Let me remind you, according to a survey conducted for Gazeta Wyborcza by CBOS on July the 7th this year, 58% of Poles are dissatisfied with the fact that Donald Tusk is Prime Minister, and 59% are dissatisfied with the work of this government. After the Prime Minister's performance during the presidential cabinet meeting, many questions arise about Donald Tusk's attitude and the future of his cooperation with the President. Such meetings are necessary, but it is clear that the President is playing to the gallery, because today he behaved as if he were a teacher, questioning his ministers as if they were his students. and that is not his role. President Karol Nawrocki is extending a hand and showing a willingness to cooperate because the goal is simply to make life in Poland better. Donald Tusk, on the other hand, has been seeking confrontation from the very beginning, from the moment it became clear that Dr. Karol Nawrocki had won the presidential election. The president's speech clearly illustrates that from the very beginning of his term of office, he has taken the initiative in dictating the terms of such meetings, such discussions on these issues, and the direction Poland should take. That is, he sets the agenda for these proceedings. Interestingly, Donald Tusk's body language suggested that the Prime Minister would rather be somewhere else. These are topics that Tusk would like to avoid. Meanwhile, Poles view this very negatively, and at the moment the president is holding him accountable, putting Tusk in the corner, which is why he is reacting so nervously and why there is so much tension in the media. Tusk's reactions indicate that he remains, as it were, in second place when it comes to exercising power in Poland at the moment, and in the opinion of Polish society, the president has more advantages. You can see that he feels insecure and is trying to compensate for it in some way with gestures or even facial expressions. The problem for the Prime Minister is that today's cabinet meeting is the first in a series of such meetings. President Karol Nawrocki wants to receive regular updates from the government. That is why he will probably convene cabinet council meetings on a regular basis. After meeting the president, Prime Minister Tusk flew to Moldova. His unfulfilled plans and promises remained in Poland.
Okay, we'll sign right here, right? Sir.
There is a new peace plan for Eastern Europe, the Middle East, and the world. Donald Trump's administration wants to resolve the most pressing conflicts within the next 4 months.
Address all of those things, but we understand that. We have technical teams working on it, and we're hopeful that by the end of this year, we actually, and maybe quite a bit sooner, we actually can find the ingredients to get to that peace deal.
U.S. President Donald Trump is once again taking on a very difficult task. The Republican president wants to protect defenseless Ukrainian civilians who are attacked every day by barbaric Russia at all costs. A trilateral meeting between Trump, Zelensky, and Putin is still possible.
I want to see that deal end. It's very serious what I have in mind if I have to do it, but I want to see it end. I think that in many ways he's there. Sometimes he'll be there and Zelensky won't be there. You know, it's like, who do we have today? I got to get them both at the same time. But I want to have it end. We have economic sanctions. I'm talking about economic, because we're not going to get into a world war.
Volodymyr Zelensky has expressed his readiness to resume talks. The Americans are putting pressure on Russia. Further sanctions are needed. We are working closely with America. At the end of the week, we will have further talks on a trilateral meeting with Russia. The American administration will consider peace scenarios for Ukraine. Talks are planned in New York.
The U.S. involvement will be discussed over the coming days. Anyway, we have to discuss more details of the security guarantees, but clearly for Ukraine to consider what to do next when it comes to territory, it is important to also know what the situation will be with the security guarantee.
But Donald Trump is not stopping there. He has set himself very ambitious peace goals. One of them is the Middle East.
It's never stopped. We've always looked to find a solution there. Ultimately, as the president said, we want it to end. It has to end with no Hamas.
The White House does not oppose the Israeli offensive against Palestinian terrorists, but condemns attacks on civilians, especially the recent shelling of a hospital in the Gaza Strip. The most important task is to bring home those civilians kidnapped by Hamas who are still in captivity, and to deal with Palestinian militants. Washington has not forgotten about Iran and its nuclear ambitions. Steve Witkoff, who is Donald Trump's peace envoy, mentioned on Monday that Donald Trump is a very peaceful president and that he deserves the Nobel Peace Prize. Why did he say that? He said it because Trump has already ended many conflicts over the last few months. Donald Trump is striving for peace on many fronts since the beginning of his second term, and that's less than 8 months ago. The Republican has stopped escalating conflicts between India and Pakistan, Cambodia and Thailand, Armenia and Azerbaijan, and pacified aggressive Yemeni Houthi terrorists. We are talking about world politics, primarily about stabilizing many hotspots and rebuilding the balance of power in the world. First and foremost, we can mention the peace agreements concluded in several hotspots. For example, in Africa, between Congo and Rwanda, and India and Pakistan, a very complex conflict, and even at the very foot of Russia, between Azerbaijan and Armenia. In addition to the peace agreements themselves, something very important to mention is the demonstrative and historic alliances concluded with Arab countries. Donald Trump has repeatedly proven that he is effective, where others see no solution. And if anyone can bring peace to the Middle East and Eastern Europe, it is the American leader. Reinstating the death penalty and declaring war on gangs, U.S. President Donald Trump has announced a radical plan to combat crime in the capital of the U.S. Not a day goes by without a shooting in one of America's major cities, resulting in the loss of lives. Gang feuds, robberies, family disputes. The reasons vary, but the tragic outcome is usually the same. The latest mass shooting at a Catholic school in Minnesota. 2 people were killed, dozens were injured. In the face of rising crime, the White House decides to take control of law enforcement in the most dangerous cities. In the capital, it sent the military onto the streets. Within a few days, over 1,000 people were arrested. Several hundred weapons and ammunition were confiscated, and a number of investigations were opened, returning to cases from the recent past.
All of our federal agencies are out here, our amazing park police. They are working hand in hand to make D.C. safe. They're out here working midnights every night because they love our country, they love our city.
Trump's decision has been criticized by Washington authorities, obviously from the Democratic Party, who claim that they can handle the problems themselves. However, Trump does not intend to back down, but rather to go a step further, and so the issue of the state criminal code has appeared on the agenda.
It'll be a crime-free city. By the way, speaking of that, anybody murders something in the Capitol, capital punishment, capital punishment. If somebody kills somebody in the Capitol, Washington, D.C., we're going to be seeking the death penalty. And that's a very strong preventative. And everybody that's heard it agrees with it.
Some of the U.S. president's advisors equate liberal laws with higher crime rates. One example cited is Chicago, which is among the cities with the highest crime rates. Republican politicians and some social activists in the city are demanding intervention, similar to that in Washington.
Look, if your streets are more violent, as these Democrat cities are, more violent than Baghdad, more violent than communities in Ethiopia and places that many Americans would never even dream of visiting, some of the most dangerous places on planet Earth.
And so Trump may decide to send troops to the streets of every city in the U.S., which of course the Democrats don't like. Chicago is already protesting even before the decision has been made.
This is not about fighting crime. This is about Donald Trump searching for any justification to deploy the military in a blue city, in a blue state, to try and intimidate his political rivals.
Chicago authorities argue that crime rates are falling and that they are keeping order in the city. Local Republican politicians, on the other hand, are calling on Trump to intervene.
So I'm thinking about, when I have some slob like Pritzker criticizing us before we even go there, I made the statement that next should be Chicago, because as you all know, Chicago is a killing field right now.
Donald Trump also decided to penalize the destruction of the American flag. According to the decree signed by the president, burning, destroying, or trampling on the American flag will be punishable by 1 year of imprisonment.